exactly how and why this disease can make it so that you have to file a disability claim. Now, in addition to the fact that I have CMT, I also spent about the last 5 years of my work life working as a disability claims examiner. I've read hundreds of disability claims, medical information, occupational information, and most importantly, disability policies. And I know how those policies work and what people are looking for in order to approve a claim. Because contrary to popular belief, as a claim examiner, you really do start off every single claim looking to approve it, not deny it. And I did also earn my master's degree in sociology with a concentration in disability studies. And so I literally spent half of my adult life in the disability space. I don't have any experience working for the Social Security Administration, but in my jobs as a claim examiner, we also worked with Social Security, and I myself have gone through the SSDI approval process. So it's something that I know more than most people do, but I can't always answer all Social Security questions perfectly. This is a topic that I do generally know quite a lot about. All right, so let's talk about the benefits of work. And I know that sounds strange, considering that I'm here to talk about stopping work and filing a disability claim, but I want to tell you that that's a big deal. And for as long as you can keep working, you want to keep doing it. Why? Because working pays the bills, I hope, anyway. And it certainly does so better than any disability benefit is going to. At most, a disability benefit is going to pay you 60% of your gross earnings before you go on disability. And that's at most, if you're lucky. Right now, I'm getting SSDI, and it's 32% of my prior gross income. That's not even half. It's a tiny, tiny amount. So if you're going to go on disability, there's some pretty significant financial impacts. There's also the issue of health insurance. Now, once you're approved for SSDI through the Social Security Administration, you will eventually get Medicare, but it takes 1.5 years. So what do you do for that 1.5 years without health insurance? Most people get it from their jobs. The other big issue is you got to think about retirement money. When you're working, you probably have a job that is allowing you to contribute to a 401k or something like that, and probably giving you a match and or a pension if you're lucky enough to have that. I had to stop working at age 38. That's more than 20 years I'm not contributing to retirement. That's a lot of money that I'm not going to have later on. And in addition to just the monetary stuff, there's some pretty significant psychosocial benefits to working, even if you have an annoying boss. And that is, there's social interaction and physical and mental stimulation and routine and emotional well-being. If you think about it, how many of us define ourselves by what we do? When you're meeting someone in a new conversation, what's the first thing people ask? They say, oh, what do you do for a living, right? And so when you are not working anymore and not having that, it can be a big blow to your sense of self. You have to kind of redefine things. And yeah, you can get physical and mental stimulation and routine without working, but you really have to work at it. And going from working full-time to not working is a huge life change. Add in the fact that there's financial repercussions and that it's probably not your choice to stop working. It's a pretty big deal. And I just hit that too soon, sorry. For me, today marks exactly 2 years to the day that I had to stop working. And I've got a supportive spouse and a loving family and a great friend network, and I still struggle with calling myself disabled, which is crazy. When I meet my daughter's friends' parents for the first time, the inevitable question of what do you do will come up, and I don't really know how to answer them. And I used to tell claimants all the time that there's no shame in it, there's nothing wrong with it, I know that, but it's still hard. You still have to really focus on defining your sense of self outside of what you do. And even though stopping work was absolutely, without question, the right thing for me to do physically, it's still hard for me to stay positive, but I'm working at it. And doing this right here, right now, is a huge part of what makes it okay for me. Okay, so types of disability insurance, and I want to go through this as quickly as possible because I want to talk about the nitty-gritty of claims. First, we have Social Security disability. There's really two types of benefits that Social Security offers. You have SSDI, which stands for Social Security Disability Insurance. And then you have triple SI, which is Supplemental Social Security Income. And the big difference between the two is one is income dependent and the other is not. With SSDI, you have to have enough work credits to qualify for it. You have to have worked within the last 5 years, and then of course you have to meet their medical guidelines for disability. But your spouse's income doesn't count against you. You could win the lottery and still collect SSDI. If you have an insurance settlement, none of that income counts against you for SSDI. Triple SI is really what it sounds like. It's supplemental, and it is for people who have very little income. Your spouse's income will count against you. It will mean that you won't qualify for that kind of additional benefit. Alimony, child support payments, any of that kind of thing will count against you. With Social Security disability, the other big thing is that Social Security's definition of disability is what we in the disability claims world call TDONEOC, which stands for Total Disability, Any Occupation. And for Social Security disability, essentially what that means is you have to be unable to sustain full-time work, which they define as 30 hours a week, in any occupation to which you are reasonably suited by education, work experience, and income. And what that means is not if you're an orthopedic surgeon and you can no longer sustain the rigors of surgery, well, you can't get SSDI because you can still be a Walmart greeter. That's not really how it works. Walmart greeter isn't exactly in conjunction with, the education and work experience of an orthopedic surgeon. But it might mean that you can't get SSDI because as a doctor, you could be a researcher, or you could be a teacher, or you could be a consultant, or you could change into a general practice kind of model so that you don't have to do surgery anymore. So that's a big issue for a lot of people. It's not just your inability to keep doing your job, it's your inability to keep doing any job that's within reason like yours, if that makes sense. Okay. And then we have state disability, and these are the only states that have state disability insurance: California, New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, and Rhode Island. And essentially what that is it's kind of like a state-sponsored short-term disability plan. And for any additional details, I am going to refer you to state websites because I don't know anything about it other than it exists. And then finally you have individual disability insurance, and that is private premium-paying disability insurance that you would have gone to an insurance agent to purchase, and if you already had a CMT diagnosis, you could never have been sold a policy because you're too high of a risk. Wow, okay. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because the likelihood that any of us have IDI insurance is very low. But if you work for a firm, most places have short and long-term disability insurance, STD and LTD. This is insurance that probably your employer is paying the bulk of the premium for, if not all of it. And this is insurance that's going to cover anywhere between 50 to 60% of your income if you have to stop working. Short-term disability is exactly what it sounds like. It's meant for a short period of time. We're going to cover anywhere between 12 to maybe 26 weeks of impairment, possibly up to a year, depending on whatever policy your employer purchased from the particular insurance company. And then long-term disability typically picks up wherever the short-term disability ends off. And it can go as long as age 65 or even now age 67 for some people. So long-term disability insurance and short-term disability insurance through your employer is probably the best place for you to get disability insurance. So if you don't work for a job now that has those kinds of things, when you're interviewing for jobs, that's the kind of benefit you want to ask about. And when you're encouraging your children as they finish college and go off to jobs, make sure that they are asking about those kinds of benefits, because the likelihood that you're going to need at least short-term disability at some point, pretty big. I do short-term disability 4 times, and that doesn't count when I had a baby, you know, because I had a hip replacement and I had knee surgery and I had ankle surgery, and you know, you're out for X amount of time. So those benefits can be really important. All right, let's go on to what is in an approvable disability claim. Sorry, I kind of got lost. Just a quick note about the claims process. The claim examiner is not your enemy. They are, in fact, your best friend. I'm going to tell you right now that denying a claim is a lot of work. Nobody likes writing denial letters, and nobody likes making that phone call. And approving a claim, best day on the job is when I have an approval to do today, I got everything I needed, I get to call someone and say, I'm approving your claim and I'm mailing you a check. It's an awesome phone conversation to have, it's a great letter to write, and it makes you feel good because you feel like you're providing benefits to people who are in need and are deserving of the benefit. And so when you're going through the claims process, be nice. Because I'm going to tell you that I and a lot of my coworkers would bend over backwards for people when we really wanted to be able to approve. We would go out and try to get information for them if they were really nice to us. If you had someone who was not so nice, you still got professional and competent claims handling, but I maybe wasn't going to go the extra mile for you. So, as they say, catch more flies with honey. You know what I'm saying? The other thing is really important for people to understand is that we have a saying in the claims world, which is trust but verify. So you can tell me all about what's going on, and I do genuinely want to hear all about your functional limitations. I want to know when you've been to the doctor. I want to know all that information. But I still have to have actual documentation in order to approve a claim. I will never forget, I had a guy once who had a terrible case of metastatic bone cancer. And he had fractured vertebrae, and I felt terrible for him. But he had Kaiser insurance, and Kaiser takes like 30 to 40 days to send medical records for some reason. That's just how they work. And his doctor hadn't sent in the attending physician form that I needed in order to approve the claim. And he called me up, furious that I hadn't approved the claim yet. He's like, this is clear. Why haven't you approved my claim? And I said, I would love to approve your claim, but I don't have any medical information at all. And he was like, oh. So he called his doctor. I got a fax from the doctor. I approved the claim that same day. So again, we do have to, I believed him. I absolutely believed him. But I can't go to my supervisor with I believe this guy on the phone when he says he has cancer. I have to have something that is documented that he really does have this diagnosis, right? Okay. So, first things first. Forms, forms, and more forms. And it's going to feel redundant, and you're going to feel like you say the same thing 18 times, especially if you're filling out forms for Social Security in addition to any private disability insurance companies, but fill them out anyway, and do it as completely as possible, because the more complete information a claim examiner has to start with, the easier it is for them to do their jobs, and the quicker you get an approval. The other thing I want to say about the forms is that I know how hard it is sometimes to handwrite those stupid forms. My handwriting is atrocious, thank you CMT, and if I have to write a lot of things for a long period of time, my hand is going to cramp, and I'm going to get fatigued. So you know what I did? I called up the Social Security claims examiner who was assigned to me, and I said, I will happily fill out all these forms. Let's do it over the phone. And they said, okay. So if you're having problems filling out the forms, reach out to the claim examiner. They will almost always give you an alternate, especially if you say, I can't do this because of my impairment. Guess what that alludes to? Functional impairment that might very well get you an approved claim. All right, the date of disability. This is something that is really, really hard for people with CMT. Because it's slowly progressive, and because we are so good at adapting, man, you just don't even notice sometimes the things that you can't do anymore because you just naturally figure out another way to go about it. And then suddenly you're tired at the end of the day. Gets to the point where you go to work and you come home and you sit down and you think, I can't get up again until it's time to go to bed. And you start living with a level of fatigue that you just think that's how life is. I'm old, I have CMT, this is how it's going to be. And so it's really hard to pinpoint a specific point in time where it's like, nope, I can't work anymore. There's no, I had a car accident and I broke my leg and now I can't work anymore, right? So I'll tell you again what I did, which is I had an appointment with my doctor a few months before when I got landed with the oxygen because of the respiratory issues. And I said, well, I gotta keep working because, you know, I've got a kid and she's gotta go to college and I'm just gonna make it work. I'm just gonna take my oxygen to work, and I troll myself in every day carrying my oxygen bag, carrying my laptop, and I would go to work and I would have to drink 4 coffees in order to stay at work, awake at work. And I would sort of nod off at my desk when I was reading really boring, terrible medical information. And a couple of months later, at the same appointment that my doctor gave me the oxygen, she said, you know, I really wish you wouldn't work anymore. And I said, yeah, I kind of still have to work, so I'm gonna go to work. And a few months later, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I would come home from work and I would be useless to my family. I couldn't be an effective mother. I couldn't be an effective spouse because I was giving 100% of my energy to work. And that's not really any way to live, right? So I called my doctor and I said, I think I'm ready to file a claim. And she said, yes, do that. So there was documentation. I had a medical appointment a few months before I went on claim, and I called my doctor and said, are you on board with this? And she said, yes. And I hung up the phone, and that was the next day I didn't go into work. I filed a claim for disability. And that was a start date. It was a hard and fast start date. And it's hard to figure that out, but you have to be in communication with your doctor. The second big thing that you have to have is documented eligibility for benefits. Now this is, if you have group long-term or short-term disability insurance, that basically means, were you working at the time that you became disabled? And was your policy in place? All of that kind of thing. So there's not a lot you're going to have to do to provide that information. For Social Security, that means, again, you have to have been working in the last 5 years, and you have to have enough Social Security credits in order to receive benefits. Now, if you don't know if you have enough Social Security credits, or you don't know what your Social Security benefit would be, you're going to go to www.ssa.gov, and you're going to sign up for My Social Security. And that's going to give you, yes, whether or not you have enough Social Security credits. It's going to tell you what your approximate benefit would be if you were to become disabled today. And that's also where you're going to start an online claim, which I think is probably the easiest way to apply for Social Security disability. All right, the other thing that disability claims folks have to have is occupational information. Why is that? Because we need to know what it is that you were doing, what you have experience doing, what your education is, what your skills are, because depending on the definition of disability in whatever insurance policy you're trying to get, you may or may not qualify if it's an own occupation definition versus an any occupation definition. So we have to have that information documented. That means that your employer is going to have to provide something. And if they're not cooperating, a call to your HR department is a good call to make. Finally, we have to have documentation of functional limitations. And these are what we call restrictions and limitations, okay? Restrictions are things you are not supposed to do. So my doctor, for example, tells me I'm not supposed to exert myself without using oxygen because my oxygen saturation dips if I exert myself without it. But sometimes it's annoying to carry it and I just don't. Now, that's a restriction. My doctor will write it down. I'm supposed to use oxygen for exertion. I don't always do that. A limitation is something you cannot do. I cannot run. It's not happening. I cannot go upstairs without something to hold on to, right? Those are things I just physically cannot do. So we have to have documentation of both your restrictions, things your doctor has said you're not supposed to do, and your limitations. What is it that you cannot do? You can't keyboard for more than 30 minutes because your hands cramp up and stop working. These are things that should be in your medical records, and they should be things that your doctor is willing to attest to, okay? And this is a big thing because a diagnosis does not equal disability. I have had CMT. I was diagnosed in infancy. I had my first surgery before I could walk. But I went to high school and college and graduate school, and I worked full-time for almost 20 years. So I had this diagnosis of CMT, but I wasn't disabled. And so just because you have a CMT diagnosis does not mean you're going to get an automatic disability approval, right? That's why we have to have documentation of those functional limitations, because that is what determines whether or not you are eligible for disability, not necessarily a diagnosis. I've had people who don't have any real diagnosis. Like they have some idiopathic, unknown cause of certain issues, but the issues are there, they still got approved because it's about your functional limitation and not necessarily your diagnosis. And then finally, and this is absolutely key, you have to have physician support. You have to be having conversations with your doctor saying, I'm so tired when I come home from work, I don't know what I'm going to do. you have to have a doctor who's willing to sign a form that says, yes, I believe this person is no longer able to work. Without that, there's no way you're going to get an approved claim. And I'm probably out of time, so we'll save questions for later. This is just a picture of all of my lovely little nieces and my daughter, who are the next generation of CMT.
Thank you so much. Wasn't that great? Great information. Thank you so much, Kate. Such great information.
Keys to well-being. A lot of what we've heard, fascinating information. There's looking for a cure, looking for treatment, but right now we're living with CMT. So how do we make the best of our reality? And I've spent many years looking at the field of